True Lies looks like a victory lap. Helicopters cutting the sky, jets screaming overhead, a spy with limitless reach, a marriage so compartmentalized the war is happening inside the house without anyone saying it out loud. But behind the spectacle, the jokes, the confidence, this movie was playing a far more dangerous game. Jamie Lee Curtis did it herself, with danger hiding under the smile. The sequel froze, then came back decades later. Eliza Dushku is tied to a secret the movie never puts on screen. These are 10 weird facts about True Lies, the blockbuster that laughed like a comedy, moved like a war movie, and hit like a relationship detonating in public. Number 1. True Lies did not feel like a normal 1994 action movie being made. It felt like a movie being financed into existence, like someone dared James Cameron to build an entire blockbuster out of pure confidence. The budget people cite lands in that wild zone, roughly $100 to $120 million, and it was treated like a line in the sand. A feature film crossing the $100 million mark was not just expensive, it was a statement, the kind that makes executives sweat and makes a director lean in harder. You can see that mindset in the way the production chased realism like it was the point of the whole joke. The fighter jets were not replicas, not dressed up props. The movie brought in real US government jets, 3 of them, and suddenly the spectacle had a clock attached to it. A reported $100,000 rental fee, plus around $2,400 per hour on top of that. That changes everything. You are not getting coverage, you are buying minutes. Every delay turns into a receipt. Every reset burns money. Every extra take becomes a decision someone has to justify. And that is where True Lies starts to feel dangerous in a way audiences do not always notice. When the sky costs that much, the movie cannot afford to look small. It has to look like a main event every time the camera rolls, which means the pressure does not stay on the budget. It slides straight onto the people on set, the schedule, the timing, the bodies inside the shots. Fixing money problems is one thing. Matching that kind of scale with human skin is where the real risk begins. Number 2. That whole stretch where Helen Tasker turns the tables looks like glossy spy fantasy. Making it was rougher, stranger, and way more personal. Start with the outfit. The lingerie Helen wears in the striptease scene was not some carefully selected costume piece meant to feel movie sexy. Jamie Lee Curtis has said it was her own. It wasn't wardrobe handing her a fantasy. It was Curtis choosing the terms. Helen is nervous, exposed, trying to be brave in real time. Curtis choosing her own pieces makes the moment feel like a choice, not a setup. Then there is the dance. This was not a perfectly rehearsed routine with a choreographer drilling every beat. Curtis has described it as loose, with Cameron asking what she wanted to move to. She picked John Hyatt's Alone in the Dark, and the performance grew out of that vibe instead of rigid steps, which is why it feels awkward in the right way, not polished, human. And then the moment everyone remembers, the fall. It was planned, but the reaction was the prize. Arnold wasn't warned it was coming, so that split-second panic, that honest flinch lands like reality breaking through the spy mask. They tried again, but the first take had the one thing you cannot recreate on command: genuine alarm. If that sounds like enough, the helicopter scene goes even harder. The dangling rescue shot over the ocean is not the kind of thing most stars volunteer to do themselves. Curtis did, no double. And she did it on her 35th birthday. The kind of detail that makes the whole production feel a little unhinged on purpose. Curtis didn't just act the transformation, she lived it. And when Cameron finally watched the finished movie, one truth got louder than the explosions. The name that mattered most wasn't the one you expected. Number 3. On paper, the billing for True Lies was supposed to be automatic. Arnold Schwarzenegger, then the title, then everybody else. That was the rule. Star first, everything else after. Then Cameron finished cutting the movie and got a problem he could not ignore. The explosions were huge, sure, but the film's heartbeat was Helen. The spy stuff is the disguise. The marriage panic is the engine, and the person carrying that engine is Jamie Lee Curtis. So Cameron did something that rarely happens in that world. He called Arnold and asked for the impossible favor. Put Curtis before the title, not a courtesy, a statement. And Arnold just said yes. No bargaining, no ego war. Curtis later described it as a real mensch move, because billing is the kind of thing people treat like territory, especially when the name at the top is already a global franchise. Curtis later said it was the greatest professional experience of her life, and you can feel why. The movie did not just use her, it recognized her. Arnold didn't argue. He didn't posture. He just cleared the space and let her name sit where the story already sat. Which is almost funny, because Helen wasn't even supposed to be Jamie Lee Curtis in the first place. The role started in someone else's hands, and one dropout rerouted the whole movie. Number 4. Before Jamie Lee Curtis ever became Helen Tasker, the role was already handled. Jodie Foster was attached first. Serious, smart, the kind of actress whose presence instantly changes the temperature of a movie like this. Then Foster dropped out to do Nell, and the floor disappeared. Because Helen is not a normal supporting wife role. She is the emotional fuse of the whole story. If she feels wrong, the movie is just stunts stitched together. So the search didn't go wide. It went desperate. It turned into a casting stampede, with the studio grabbing at the biggest names it could reach. Michelle Pfeiffer, Sharon Stone, Gina Davis, Demi Moore, Julia Roberts, Sandra Bullock. A lineup so loud it felt like they were auditioning completely different versions of the same film. Pick the wrong Helen and the movie tilts in a completely different direction. Some would have made her cooler from the start. Tougher, glamorous, more spy movie ready. The safe versions all worked. That was the problem. A woman who begins as overlooked and restless, then gets dragged through fear, humiliation, temptation, and adrenaline until she finally earns the transformation. Foster leaving didn't just open the door. It turned casting into a hill worth dying on. And the next battle proved Cameron meant it. Number 5. Tom Arnold was not the safe studio pick. He was the risky one. Loud reputation, tabloid noise. A name executives could already imagine turning into a headache before the cameras even rolled. But Cameron didn't want safe. He wanted a pressure valve. According to Tom's own story, he walked into the audition thinking it was just a chance to meet James Cameron. Then he read with Arnold Schwarzenegger and something snapped into place fast. Because the movie already had the machine, Arnold and Jamie Lee Curtis, the spy fantasy, the marriage tension, the explosions. What it didn't have yet was the guy who could stand inside that machine and make it feel human while it's spinning at full speed. Tom cracked jokes. He poked at Arnold's myth, the kind of line that either gets you kicked out or gets you hired, because the room laughs before it can stop itself. Cameron laughed, and once Cameron laughs, he commits. The studio still pushed back, hard. They didn't want him. They worried he hadn't earned a spot in a blockbuster, and they didn't want extra drama hovering around the production. Cameron pushed back harder. He told them he wrote the part for Tom. He said he didn't care about tabloids. Then he dropped the threat that ends arguments. He would take the entire production to Paramount if they wouldn't let him cast the guy he wanted. That's not a note. That's a gun on the table. The studio blinked. Tom got the role. And suddenly, True Lies had its third lead. The loyal, frantic partner who can stand next to Schwarzenegger and still steal oxygen. Cameron didn't fight for Tom Arnold because it was polite. He fought because without that chaos, the movie's whole rhythm collapses. Number 6. True Lies didn't begin as James Cameron's next original. It began as a finished engine sitting in another country, already proving the premise could work. The 1991 French film La Totale had the trap built in. One husband with 2 lives, one wife in the dark, and a marriage quietly decaying because the truth never makes it through the front door. Then the fuse got lit in the most human way possible: family. One telling says Arnold Schwarzenegger's brother-in-law, Robert Shriver, showed him a French film sometimes referenced in English as The Jackpot. And Arnold didn't latch onto a stunt or a punchline. He latched onto the tension. A man who's basically James Bond at work, then comes home and has to explain himself like any other husband. Not bigger explosions, a character problem. Cameron watched it and saw the same poison at the center. The comedy, sure, but also the humiliation and paranoia. The wife gets tempted by a man she thinks is a glamorous secret agent, and he turns out to be a salesman playing dress-up. That twist is the knife because it isn't just spy stuff. It's the marriage getting tested in public. And then Cameron did the Cameron thing. He kept the skeleton and inflated everything around it until it felt American-sized. Bigger set pieces, louder targets, broader scale. If La Totale plays like a sharp premise under a microscope, True Lies turns it into a blockbuster meltdown. Because the real bomb isn't only the one in the third act. It's the lie sitting at the dinner table every night, acting like it belongs there. Number 7. The movie didn't just need Harry Tasker to look deadly, it needed him to look effortless. The kind of guy who can cross a ballroom like it's another weapon he already knows how to use. So Arnold did something nobody expects from an action icon. He trained for the tango for about 6 months. Not a quick polish. Real rehearsal. Real repetition. Because the spy fantasy collapses if he looks stiff for even one beat. The smile has to land like a punch. Clean. Timed. automatic. Then the real danger showed up in the least glamorous way possible. The movie throws him onto a horse for that chase after Art Malik's character, and the horse reportedly got spooked by the camera setup. It reared near the edge, and the scene stopped being movie risk and turned into one wrong second. The drop was described as around 90 feet, not a bruised ego. A headline: Arnold got off in time, and a stuntman pulled him clear before it turned into a catastrophe. That's the brutal irony. The tango was the part he trained for. The scariest moment was a living animal deciding it was done cooperating. And after all that risk, all that money, all that chaos, the only question left was simple: did the world pay it back? Number 8. In 1994, this didn't feel like a hit. It felt like a main event. It hauled in about $378 million worldwide and finished as the third biggest film of the year, sitting right behind Forrest Gump and The Lion King. And for one loud stretch of summer, it even knocked Forrest Gump out of the #1 spot on opening, like the calendar had to flinch and make space before the crown slid back. The industry treated it like a heavyweight too. Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects, even if the win went to Gump. And it wasn't winning in a quiet year either. Speed came first, then True Lies landed a month later, and suddenly, the same studio had two R-rated action giants fighting for oxygen. Domestically, True Lies still edged it out, roughly $146 million to $121 million. Critics could call the plot ridiculous and still admit the spectacle worked. The backlash hit the terrorist portrayal and the fake interrogation marriage cruelty, but the scoreboard stayed brutal and simple. In 1994, True Lies wasn't underrated. It was unavoidable, and when a movie wins that hard, Hollywood only asks one question next: where's part 2? Number 9. For a while, a True Lies sequel wasn't just fan wishful thinking. It had the shape of a real plan. Same core cast, same engine, only louder. Bigger lies, bigger set pieces, and a marriage with even more damage left to hide. Then, the calendar changed the genre. After September 11th, glossy action comedy built around terrorism stopped feeling like a playground. Cameron has said the world shifted, and the tone that made True Lies fun didn't feel like something you could wink through anymore. The sequel didn't die because the idea was weak. It died because the timing turned toxic. So the franchise sat in silence until it tried a different body. In 2023, CBS rebooted the premise as a TV series, stretching the secret spy spouse concept into a weekly marriage pressure test. New faces, Steve Howie and Ginger Gonzaga, and a different rhythm. Less Cameron-sized spectacle, more domestic fallout, repeated in episodes instead of detonated in one massive ride. It lasted one season, and that ending tells you the truth about the problem. True Lies was built to be an event. When it comes back smaller, it risks feeling like an echo. So the closest thing it got to part 2 wasn't another movie. It was the story squeezed into missions, bullets, and button presses on a controller. Number 10. The movie sells tuxedos, one-liners, and secret agent fantasy. The game sells panic. When True Lies hit the console pipeline, it got crushed into a top-down run and gun on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. No charm, no flirting, just Harry Tasker storming rooms, clearing corridors, grabbing intel, and treating every doorway like it might be the one that ends you. The film winks at danger. The game makes you earn every step. Then it adds a rule that changes the whole feel. Civilians are in the mix, so you can't just hose the screen and feel heroic. You're pushed to watch your shots while alarms scream and enemies swarm, turning spray and pray into aim or lose. Even the upgrades don't feel like victory. They feel like heavier consequences in your hands. And right when the loop risks turning into pure repetition, it drops its loudest reminder of where all this came from. A mission called Harrier. Jet-fueled nostalgia, shoved into pixels like a stamped passport. True Lies became a blockbuster by making espionage look fun. The game took the same title and made it feel like survival. And the strangest part is the Harrier reminder isn't just nostalgia, because in the real movie, the Harrier sequence has a shadow that isn't pixels at all. Bonus fact: the Harrier jet sequence plays like pure Cameron adrenaline. Wind, wires, machinery, and a kid caught inside a blockbuster that never slows down. Eliza Dushku was only 12 while playing Dana Tasker, and years later she said the set was not just intense, it was dangerous in ways the camera could never show. In January 2018, Dushku publicly alleged that the film's stunt coordinator Joel Kramer molested her during production. She also wrote that after an adult confronted him on set, she was injured during a stunt the same day and broke ribs, framing the timing as something she could not ignore, especially since the stunt team had direct control over her safety. Kramer has denied the allegation, calling them atrocious endless lies, and insisting nothing inappropriate happened. He said the only contact was harmless, claiming the outing she described was simply swimming and dinner, with other crew members present, not an assault. James Cameron later called her account heartbreaking, and said that if he had known at the time, there would have been no mercy. So that Harrier moment lands with a different weight once you know the story behind it. That wasn't movie danger. That was a child on a set where the adults failed the basic job. That's the quiet contradiction of true lies. It didn't last by being subtle. It lasted by hiding something sharp inside the noise. A marriage story wearing the suit of a blockbuster, loud enough to entertain you, and personal enough to cut. If you enjoyed these weird facts, hit like and subscribe. And if you want to keep this one close, you can grab it through the link below. Some movies don't just age, they tighten, like a smile you keep up for everyone else, until it slips.